YouTube's evolution into the #1 streaming platform on TV screens in the US and its growing dominance in short-form video via YouTube Shorts has unlocked massive opportunity for brands. But with more scale comes more complexity, especially when it comes to finding brand-safe, high-performing inventory. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, Strategies for Maximizing YouTube Media Performance. Today's webinar is sponsored by Pixability. I'm Annie Hildebrand, Senior Director of Production of the Adweek Branded Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. I want to take a minute just to let folks know what they can expect from today's webinar presentation. We have a really fantastic lineup of speakers that will be talking to you today. And after that presentation, we'll have some time for some audience Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speakers during the webinar, you can go ahead and ask using our Q&A tool. You can find that just below the video window on your screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. It's also not too late to invite any of your colleagues who you think would be interested in today's topic. You should have gotten a reminder email about 15 minutes ago. In that email, there is a link to our registration page. You can share that with them. It's not too late for them to join, but if they're not able to, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand later today. And that on-demand version is available to all of you as well. Around 3:30 today, following the webinar, you should get an email that has a link to that recording. And if you'd like a PDF of today's slides, you can also find that in the event resources area that is underneath your video player as well. But I would like to kick things off and introduce our wonderful speakers. So today we are joined by Matt Duffy. Matt leads marketing strategy at Pixability, which is the only company certified by the YouTube measurement program for both brand suitability, contextual targeting, and YouTube content insights. We also have Jess Goon. Prior to joining Tate's Bake Shop, Jess served as Chief Growth Officer at Spring Foods and as Vice President of Digital Marketing and Consumer Experience at Kind Snacks, which was acquired by Mars in 2020. And finally, we have Brendan Alberts of Dentsu. Brendan leads the agency's US digital activation teams across search, SEO, commerce, programmatic, and paid social. With more than 15 years at Dentsu, he brings deep expertise in performance media and a passion for building future-ready solutions that help brands stay ahead in a fast-changing digital landscape. We're really excited to have all of you here, and I'm happy to pass things over to Matt to get started. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Annie. Welcome, everyone. I am very excited to be here, as Annie said, with a top executive from a brand and a top executive from an agency in Jess and Brendan. So we're going to get some really exciting perspectives on all the craziness happening on YouTube right now and how brands and agencies are approaching their strategies. So very excited to be here. Lots to talk about. For those of you that don't know Pixability, we are a third-party tech and data company focused on YouTube. And our mission is really to help brands make every impression matter on YouTube. And as we'll talk about today, even though the title of the webinar talks about media performance, it goes beyond just media performance. It's really all about all kinds of outcomes on YouTube. And you'll hear from Brendan and Jess, who both share the same ideas that YouTube is not just an ad platform. It's a lot more than that, obviously. So just to quickly go over what we're going to be talking about, we're going to first set the stage about why YouTube is really sort of having a moment right now. It's a crazy moment for YouTube right now. And then we're going to get into 4 specific strategies that we've seen work for brands and agencies to drive outcomes. Again, there are lots we could talk about, but we're going to zoom in on these 4. And then at the end, we'll sum up and we'll open it up to questions. So excited to do that for you all. So we will start with what I mentioned, which is sort of setting the stage on why it's a special time for YouTube. I've been working for 7 years at Pixability focused on YouTube, and I've never seen anything like what's happening now with YouTube. And we're going to show you what we mean by that. We're seeing articles like this all over the place where YouTube is being called the new king of all media. This is from an article where Moffett-Nathanson, the media research firm, was talking about how YouTube is going to overtake Disney in terms of revenue and all of the different ways that it's become the new king of media. One of those ways is, it's been the largest video platform for reach forever. And this continues to be the case where it reaches more people in the world than any other platform, right? So that's an obvious reason to consider, having a good strategy for YouTube. But some of the cooler things that have just happened more recently are this shift where this year was the first year that TV viewership on YouTube surpassed mobile viewership. And YouTube CEO told us about this earlier this year. Now, we've seen this shift for a while. And this has resulted in YouTube being the #1 platform for reach on TV in terms of streaming platforms, bigger than Netflix, bigger than Disney, bigger than Prime, et cetera. And so what we'll talk to Brendan and Jess about is not every company is putting YouTube in a CTV plan, right? They might be, working just across some of the other players here and thinking of YouTube in another bucket. So we're going to talk a lot about that. The other big reason why it's becoming sort of the new king of all media is its shorts social format has become extremely popular, has huge reach. In fact, you can see bigger reach here than Insta and TikTok. And more importantly, a lot of incremental reach that you don't get from TikTok and Reels. Oh, I will actually just mention too that this past slide on UK numbers just came out that YouTube is now #2 in all of the UK to BBC. So we're seeing this same pattern all over the world. So I'll pause there. I'd love to hear both Brendan and Jess each kind of say like what they're seeing in terms of YouTube, in terms of craziness. And then we're going to talk about some of the downsides of YouTube. Jess, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think it's been so interesting to see the evolution. One of the things with YouTube in particular is the rapid pace of change and how different it operates from other social platforms. So, a lot of people are trying to get on Shorts using the exact same playbook as TikTok or the exact same playbook as Instagram Reels. And it really is nuanced and different. So I think what has been interesting to see is just keeping up with the pace and complexity of the platform and resourcing you need on the brand side to be able to do that effectively.
Yeah, and Brendan, what are you seeing from the agency side?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Matt, thank you for having me. Happy to be here today. But I totally agree with what you said earlier about YouTube having its moment. I think beyond the double-digit revenue growth that was just reported in Google's recent earnings report, almost everything that we're seeing from the agency vantage point kind of validates that notion. Everything from the success of YouTube Shorts to the growth in CTV viewership, increased adoption and maturity of the demand gen product, heightened engagement rates really across the board. And really, underpinning all of this is how Google has embedded AI into their full suite to really enhance targeting and content creation and ad performance. And as we've attempted to analyze the why behind all the active engagement that we're seeing, it really, it makes intuitive sense. When users go to YouTube, everything there is video. It's a video first, video only platform. So they're choosing to go there to either be entertained, inspired, or educated. So, users are navigating the platform with some form of focused intent, and it really becomes the central hub for attention. And so that's why we're seeing those longer sessions. And when you combine that with the unparalleled scale that you were alluding to, and its precision targeting capabilities, that's a really powerful proposition for advertisers.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking a little bit later about what Brendan just said about sort of what the intent is for YouTube users versus TikTok users, how there are differences. And like Jess said, so you shouldn't just apply the same strategies for all. So we just talked about how amazing YouTube is right now, but it has also become more complex than ever to figure out the right way to do things on YouTube, because there are so many different options. CTV, regular video campaigns, social campaigns, different targeting options, suitability issues. So what we're seeing is this complexity has led to sort of more disarray sometimes on the advertiser side than we've seen in the past, where advertisers are not always landing on the content they want. And this doesn't mean just from a suitability standpoint. This means from an audience engagement standpoint. So we're seeing advertisers can waste as much as 45% of their campaigns either on content that they wouldn't want to be on, or not engaging audiences with performance, or both. And so what we're going to focus on today is 4 things that we're seeing work to help kind of end the madness a little bit, to help brands perform and drive outcomes, really, because that's what we're all looking for, right? And so we'll start with this idea of demand gen, which for those of you that don't know is one of Google's AI formats, similar to Performance Max, where they're basically saying, tell us what your performance goals are, and we're going to take care of the rest. The good news is, as we'll see, is it's working well. The challenge is you have less control yourself. You're basically ceding control to AI. So because of this format, which we'll talk about in a second, we're seeing a shift towards people thinking of YouTube as more of a full funnel platform. This is a study that we do every year of media agencies, both in the US and in Europe. And this is from the US study, but the Europe study had the same pattern, where you can see that the tan bar from last year, from 2024, is showing that YouTube was still thought of more as an awareness platform. It still is a great awareness platform, but you can see the shift to full funnel. You can see people starting to think full funnel with YouTube. And so, demand gen is a piece of that for sure. And we're seeing insane performance from demand gen, but we're also hearing from agencies and brands a little bit of help us understand a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. Help us decide whether is demand gen even right for us, or there are other ways to drive performance. And, this is a little clip from an article in Digiday where agencies were saying, Google's pushing these AI formats, but we sometimes don't want to do that and want to have more control over what we're doing. Brendan, I'll turn it to you quickly, because I know your teams who we work with are very smart about knowing when to use demand gen and when not, but we're not always seeing that. Talk a little bit about these sort of AI formats like demand gen and how you guys are approaching it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, with demand gen specifically, I think what makes this campaign type so compelling for advertisers is really the range it offers. It truly is full funnel, in that you can reach consumers at all points of their consumer journeys with a single campaign type. And that in and of itself is attractive. Because we know consumers are constantly online. They're moving seamlessly and often unpredictably between searching, streaming, scrolling, shopping. And with demand gen and really YouTube more broadly, you can tap into different formats designed to engage users wherever they are in the funnel. And so I think you touched on the fact that the limited controls to date has been a barrier for some brands and for some advertisers. I think we've been very pleased to see that Google has introduced enhanced advertiser controls recently. I think in the first quarter of this year, we started to see increased controls, including the ability to target specific formats like Shorts, as well as improved measurement and comparison features. I think for e-commerce brands, there's been enhancements for retailers, things like local offers, shopping ads, omni-channel bidding, basically connecting your online ads to people actually visiting your store locations, helping to bridge that online and offline gap. So Google has done a good job of incorporating feedback from brands and advertisers related to the need and desire for more controls, and they've listened. But I think that's part of the general theme we're seeing with a lot of these unified campaign types, which is the change management that's needed to relinquish some of that control that we're accustomed to as marketers.
Yeah, and what we recommend to people is use it when needed, but don't feel like it's the default for performance. There are ways to drive performance without having to cede control to Google. As Brendan said, the demand gen format is taking advantage of things outside of YouTube too. So you're running on Discovery, you're running on Gmail, you're running on all these different Google things, which is a great advantage of working with Google. But it also is less sort of like, well, where does that show up? Like, what does that mean? What we recommend is you use it wisely and you find a partner that can help you do exclusions to create a little bit more suitability, because you don't have the control that you have with normal campaigns where you can do placements. And we'll talk about that a bit, and Jess has some ideas on this where you can actually specifically choose the placements. There's not a lot of control to do that in demand gen. So you can find a partner that can help you with excluding some bad stuff like Made for Kids, if that's not something you want, bad actors, et cetera. But also we've built some custom dashboards for folks, because we also think what Google does is they don't really show you why things worked. They sort of say like, this is your great performance, but as a marketer, and Jess and I talk about this, we want to know, like, was it that creative plus this, headline? Was it, and so you should find a partner that can help you with some of that detail. So that's one thing. I think the second thing that we're going to talk about, and this is where Jess, I'm definitely going to look for your thoughts, is curation. To me is sort of, it's becoming a buzzword, but I think it's one of the most important topics for the future of advertising because of the the amount of content out there, and this is not just YouTube, obviously, this is CTV, this is TikTok, this is everything, right? There's so much content. So how does an advertiser, find the right content? And this is, again, not just about suitability, it's about contextual performance. This is probably an analogy you have all heard me say, or someone say, that, YouTube's still uploading, and this is increasing, 500 hours of video is uploaded every minute, which is the equivalent of a whole Netflix worth of content every hour. So just imagine that 24 new companies like Netflix are being created every day by YouTube, right? And so that's a lot of content. And for an advertiser, a typical YouTube campaign may run on hundreds of thousands of channels. So in the old days, I'm old enough to remember when you would just pick, here are the 6 TV shows we want to run on. You can't pick 200,000 channels you want to run on. So it's about curation. And one of the things we're seeing is the kind of standard YouTube options are not fitting the bill in creating a balance between suitability and performance. You're either getting some really great suitability, like, a Dentsu team or Jess's team could come to us and say, give me a list of 100 channels that are the perfect channels for us. And we can do that, but you're going to not have the scale or performance potentially. Or you can use demand gen, like we just said, and it will open it up to the whole world of channels, but you're not going to have the control. So, and there are some things in between. What we're finding is that really the way that AI can work well is through curation. And we're using agentic curation now, and we're going to be launching something really big in a few weeks. So this is the first look, not an actual look, but a first hint at what's coming of something we're doing now for clients. But I'd love to turn it to you, Jess, and talk a little bit about why curation and specifically for Tate's, why there are certain things you'd want and wouldn't want in your content that you're advertising on.
My favorite example with Tate's is we're a cookie. So a lot of times we are looking at, YouTube as a search engine bidding on cookie terms. One of the things you have to be careful of is there's an entire topic about website cookies and accepting cookies on your website. And we don't want to be running ads against people learning about cookies in the tech world, thinking we are bidding on a keyword strategy. It's not unique to Tate's either. There are so many examples. When I was at Kind is a really tricky brand search term to bid on within YouTube. So what we found here is nuance really matters. And, when Matt was teasing sort of what's to come, if you could somehow replicate what it would be if you had somebody full-time finding those perfect channels, those perfect fit influencers, and creating a custom but scalable list of here are the perfect contextual audience and keyword channels you'd want to run on, that is the dream, is how do you take that but scale it? So there's a lot to consider that is more than just any other platform or interest target or vertical.
Yeah, and we put together sort of like a quick example of how this would work how this works for Tate's, where there's this giant universe, right? A data partner could use agentic curation, and this is what it would look like. It would be cookie content, but not getting rid of cookies on, in Chrome content. It would be channels reaching snack purchasers potentially. It would be channels that perform well in the past for Tate's. With agentic, you can also do amazing things with lookalike channels, where you could say, we want to find all the channels that look like channels that have performed well or that you like. And then again, Jess, you gave me a great example of why you don't want to run on made for kids channels, which is a challenge on Google. Right?
My favorite example, and I won't say which brand this is, but a while ago I was, my kids were watching YouTube on Saturday morning on TV, and all of a sudden I hear my brand ad running on my kids' YouTube account. And it was an adult targeted brand, and I immediately turned around, and that was one of the things that Pixability has been able to help with is, there are so many different levers that YouTube has that other platforms do not. So thankfully they were able to come in and fix that for us, but it can happen very, very easily.
Yeah, and again, imagine an agent doing all the work, like Jess said. It's like if you could hire like 1,000 people to sit there and pick thousands of channels that fit, that's what it's like. And it's going to change everything, as we know. And advertising is changing faster than in the last 5 years. It's going to change more than that this year. It's insane. All right. So third topic, in terms of driving performance. So far we've talked about using demand gen smartly, using agentic curation. The third thing is, we mentioned this in the intro, but YouTube is not just a video platform. It's a TV platform. It's a social platform. And we are seeing time and time again, brands and agencies not use it to its fullest. And this slide sums it up. When I showed this to Jess and Brennan, they were like, oh yeah, this is what we see. This again is from our media agency study from this year, where we asked people like, how do you categorize YouTube? And some people said it's a digital video platform. Some people said it's a social media platform. Some people said it's a TV platform. Some people said it's a direct response channel. But there's tons of overlap, right? And so what we're seeing is some brands and agencies that are only taking advantage of one pocket of YouTube here, either because teams are siloed or for some reason. And so, Brendan, we kind of talked about this and how Dentsu is doing a good job of making sure that all the bases are covered and that the client isn't just thinking of YouTube in this one way. They're thinking of all the different screens and so forth.
Yeah, and I love using the Venn diagram example here with the overlapping circles, because really, YouTube sits squarely at the middle. We often refer to YouTube as being at the intersection of modern media. And so, without a doubt, this introduces the ownership conundrum of which team should manage it, or which budget should it be funded from. And honestly, from my experience, there isn't a consistent one-size-fits-all approach. It really depends on the advertiser, the media mix, the goals for the platform. You've got social and video and digital reflected here. And, I'd also throw search into the mix, which I guess might be the direct response in the upper right, given that you can also activate from SA360 and directly from Google Ads. So search specialists are also well-versed in some of those elements. But, regardless of who owns it, really the most crucial piece is achieving that cross-channel collaboration. Let's say it's ultimately managed by a digital and programmatic expert. Well, they should absolutely be collaborating with their social counterparts if they're running shorts, or getting insights from their paid search program, related to the search intent signals and query volume and et cetera, that we can pull out of search to inform targeting. But I think it's important to recognize that the whole industry, brands, advertisers, agencies, everyone is feeling a bit overwhelmed with the magnitude and pace of change happening around us. So, as brands grapple with who is best suited to own the platform, it really boils down to galvanizing the support and the connection and alignment across all the various specialisms to really unlock the most value out of YouTube.
Yeah, and I think you made a very smart point that it is different for every advertiser too. Like there are advertisers that would unify these things in one way, and it might work better for a different brand in another way. I think one of the things we're getting asked a lot is, what kind of content should we run on TV screens? And so we have a solution where we can say, listen, if you want TV quality content, we have a solution for that. But we also say to people, don't feel limited by that. I know, Jess, you were a pioneer of this back in your Kind days of saying, we got to run TV ads on YouTube, and they don't always have to be on content that's sort of like a TV show. It can be a very famous creator. It could be, whatever makes sense. Right? You talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest area of opportunity within YouTube and fits within the who owns it bucket as well. Yeah. I think the opportunity within YouTube is to have as much creative as you can. Some of the best performing creative I've run for brands on YouTube is over 2 minutes long, with a really great hook in the beginning, but that tells a story. And what value? There's very few platforms that will engage someone full screen for 2 minutes. But you also need a 15 and a 30. And those 15 and 30s do need something that's going to pull somebody in the first 5 seconds so they don't skip the ad. And then you're going to need a 6-second bumper. And then you're going to need a complimentary YouTube short. So much of this is thinking about content holistically, it still surprises me where you have TV content that has the normal narrative build running on YouTube, because you are going to lose all of those quote unquote free impressions in the skippable media format in the first 5 seconds of an ad buy. So for me, creative is the unlock for YouTube. And so, you know, I often think that YouTube should be owned by no one, or if anything, by the creative, right? If you have the right creative, then, you know, the media plan can follow that, and YouTube can leverage every format of that. So this is a big passion point for me, and I think something that brands are often not set up to execute well.
Yeah, and the three of us could do a whole webinar probably on the importance of creative in all of this. So like all of these things don't work if you don't have the right creative, right? So just a couple you know, pieces of advice we give folks when advertising on TV screens is based on the metrics you're looking for. If you're looking for click-through rates, you're obviously not going to get click-through rates. That doesn't mean there aren't ways to track conversions from people that saw a TV ad on YouTube. It's actually great for that. But it is great for video completion rates. Part of the reason for this is people don't know how to navigate TV screens. But so if you want to see, you know, VCR and that kind of metric, it's a great thing to do. Switching to shorts a little bit. Again, we talked about this earlier. Shorts have a bigger audience than TikTok in every single age category, actually. So what is working in shorts versus on TV screens? Well, it's kind of the opposite of what we talked about. You don't get completed views on shorts. People are tending to scroll through a feed. It's the same with TikTok. You don't get a ton of completed views. What you get is great reach. And what you'll see a lot of these AI ad formats from Google, they'll put shorts in there when reach is a KPI. So know that if you want completed views, you don't use shorts. If you want reach, you do use shorts. And so these are the types of things where you need someone to help you with that. We're also seeing shorts work really well for brand lift. And this gets to something that we talked about in the beginning, that the mindset of people going to YouTube is a little bit sort of, I'm going to find out and learn about something. Whereas TikTok, it's a little bit more like, I'm just going to be entertained while I'm in line or while I'm, waiting for something else. And so it's more of a quick hit on TikTok versus more of an awareness thing on YouTube. And I just give a quick example of a really fun campaign that we helped our partners ignited, a great agency out of California, Chicken to the Sea campaign, where they did a great job, similar to how Jess has done in the past, of both short form and long form in one campaign, but using different creative for each, using different tactics for each, and having a really great result. All right, so we talked about three important strategies. This last one is definitely one that we all kind of resoundingly agreed on, which is having more of a 360 approach to YouTube. It's not just an ad platform, right? First, let's just think about measurement, though. Like even running ad campaigns, I know the three of us all get asked about, well, what can you measure on YouTube? What kind of things in terms of outcomes, can you measure? And there's all the core media metrics like reach and clicks and views and so forth. And then there's some really interesting media quality metrics beyond just suitability and safety, like attention metrics. You can measure sustainability of a campaign now, whether it was green, what kind of carbon footprint it had. Viewability, obviously. There's ways you can measure audience reach. And then the impact metrics really start to get to sort of outcomes like brand lift, search lift, store visits, conversions, revenue, MMM campaigns, which Jess has done millions of and had great success with, but also organic growth, which is like, how is your channel and organic presence opened up because of what you've done? And so what we're seeing, and Brendan and Jess kind of agree with this, is sometimes YouTube is not only siloed in terms of how an ad campaign is run, but siloed in terms of all the other things, non-advertising, that you can do on YouTube. You could have a suitability focused component. You could have a performance focused component, but often these are separate. Like there might be someone running performance campaigns that's running demand gen or performance max. And then separately, they have this part of the brand that's running very brand suitable campaigns where they're not really driving performance. It's more of an awareness play. And then you often have someone completely separate that's running the channel for the company. And then someone completely separate that's running creator strategy for the company. And I know we have some folks that I can already see questions in our chats of people asking about creator strategy. And then insights, you're often getting insights from various other partners. And so we're seeing this be very siloed and separate. And so what we always suggest, and again, I'm using Tate's as an example because they do a good job at this, of thinking of this as a 360-degree approach to YouTube. Don't just say like, I'm going to run a bunch of ads and hopefully get a bunch of clicks. Think about, what is your channel like? You would be blown away by how bad major brands' YouTube channels are. They think of it as a place to just store their content. As a reminder, YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. Now, this is changing fast because ChatGPT is about to beat both YouTube and Google potentially. But as of now, YouTube is still a very important place to be optimized for SEO, even if you don't advertise, right? And so why are you not paying attention to your channel? So that's a piece of it. The other piece of it is brands are finding real success outside of advertising, creating great content that gets engaged with. Red Bull's a great example. They obviously do a lot with extreme sports, so most of their content is not about drink a Red Bull. It's about this extreme sport, and people are engaging with it, and it's great branding, and it's driving great results for them. So organic strategy is very important. I also like to give the example of Kansas City Chiefs. Heard their CMO speak where they could have put their show about their team on any platform, Netflix, Hulu, Prime, or Max, all would have paid for this show, and they put it on YouTube. So if you're a brand out there and you're just running ads, or you're an agency working with a brand running ads, talk to them about their full 360 approach to YouTube. And it's not just running ads. Jess, you want to comment on this briefly? Because I know this is also near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, I think it's, in general, longer form content can be really effective. And I know we had a question come through even in the chat on this, but it has to be fit for purpose, right? So, the Chiefs are trying to build, long form storytelling and create a global brand. Makes a ton of sense for them, right? For Tate's has our original bake shop in Southampton. It is a Hamptons hotspot. It is where we come up with a lot of products. For us to sort of do a day in the life and tour of the bake shop in the Hamptons makes a ton of sense. People might be interested in that. Are they going to be interested in a 30-minute deep dive series on the history of chocolate chips from Tate's? Maybe not, right? So it really is fit for purpose. If you are a brand or a product that is a deep researched product, right? Something where there's a lot of questions and people are, searching within YouTube to find answers, whether it's tech or cars or one of those higher research categories, long form content can be incredibly effective. Even from an organic approach, if people are searching for, what is the best electric SUV, if you are creating longer form content that answers that, you can then come up first and be part of that organic strategy in addition to your ad campaign. So I have found, and my one example from Kind is the best performing creative of all time was a long form YouTube video. Best performing in terms of all of those metrics Matt had above: awareness, but conversion, purchase intent, marketing mix analysis. That video ended up being the #1 marketing mix ROI for the entire company, right? So it can work, but it has to be fit for purpose. Not all long form content is created equal.
Yeah, and what we've seen work really well for brands, whether they're working with an agency or not, is to manage their channel and their advertising in some kind of unified way, because you get amazing ideas about what's working. Like you could post a 3-minute video on your organic channel and say, oh, maybe we should be using this more in our advertising, and vice versa, and so there's a lot of learnings you can get by unifying those two things. The other place we're seeing silos is creator campaigns are often kind of separate from YouTube campaigns. And YouTube has come a long way as a creator platform. Just a few years ago, when we worked with creator firms, they're like, well, we don't think of it as a creator platform. It's a different kind of platform. You know, we work with TikTok and Snap and Insta and so forth. It's really, I think Shorts has really made it become thought of again as a creator platform, and very trustworthy too, because it's more longer form content and so forth. There's lots of different ways that you can make sure your creator campaigns are tied into your advertiser campaigns. One thing is going back to the agentic example, and this actually answers a question from someone in the audience, is you can curate the creators you work with in the same way that you curate your ad inventory, and you can decide whether you want those things to be one and the same. You can decide whether, hey, I'm working with these 6 creators. Are we gonna run ad campaigns on their channels and work with them, or are we going to do separate things? But here's just an example where, you know, if a food brand came to us and said, Nick DiGiovanni is one of our favorite food creators that we work with, but we want to do a campaign to a bunch of micro influencers on YouTube. Can you find us 100 other Nicks? And so this is where agentic curation is going to do such a better job than you one by one looking through trying to find 100 or 1,000 lookalike creators. And you know, I know, Jess, you talked about tying your ad campaigns to your creator campaigns is very important to you. It's not done often. And Brendan, I know we've talked to your teams about this, and they love this because they love the more that Dentsu teams can connect the dots between all of these things, the better it is for everyone. The better it is for the brand, the better it is for Dentsu. I'm gonna just have one more thing here, and then we'll open it up to questions. But the final thing related to completing this kind of circle of ways you can work with YouTube is having insights on what works and what doesn't work across all of these things. This is something that you know. Do you know what your brand presence is like compared to your competitors organically? Do you know what's working from an advertiser standpoint? These are just examples of, like, the thing on the left is a bunch of beauty brands, how they're doing organically versus each other. The thing on the right is for an alcohol brand, do you know what types of content is working for other alcohol brands right now? So having this combination, going back to the full circle of, you know, having a brand suitability strategy, a performance strategy, an organic strategy, a creator strategy, and an insight strategy that all tie together is something that all of us feel like is probably one of the biggest keys to performance. You can do whatever you want, but if you're not kind of tying these all together, it's super important. So again, just to sum up, and then we'd love to open it up to questions. So YouTube is having a moment, a crazy moment. Here are just 4 ways to kind of get the most out of it to drive outcomes. Demand gen, do it right. Curation, do it agentically. Video plus TV plus social, unify these things, and then unifying the big picture of YouTube across all the things we just talked about. So with that, we'd love to open it up to questions. I see some great questions in here. Annie, I guess we'll kick it back to you to ask us the ones that you think make the most sense.
Yeah, wonderful. I just want to thank the 3 of you for that really interesting, like, insightful presentation that's so top of mind for anyone who is trying to tap into anything on YouTube. And obviously there's like such a range of content there. And I also can't wait for that webinar that you mentioned. You could do a whole webinar on creative. Can't wait for that.
That's the next one, yeah.
So just for our audience to know, we're going to jump into some of the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as possible in like the next 5 to 10 minutes. We have gotten a lot of questions, and I want to thank our audience for submitting some really interesting questions. If you have more, or if you haven't had a chance to submit a question yet, you can do that in the Q&A tool. It's right under it should be right under the video screen on the player. And then if we don't get to your question, these will be shared with the Pixability team. We'll make sure that they are able to follow up with you outside of the webinar if possible. So these will be passed on even if we don't get to your question. Before we jump in, though, I do want to give just a couple of reminders. Like I said at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to if you missed anything that was said earlier and you want to reference it later, you will get an email of how to access the on-demand recording. And then also, if there's any slides that you saw that you want to reference again, you can download that PDF in the event resources area. Lots of great stats. And what is YouTube, what kind of channel it is, that Venn diagram of bubbles, I'm like, that will be helpful. So interesting. But let's jump into questions. So for this question, Matt and Brendan, I think this one's for you. Do you all run into brand marketers who still don't see the value of YouTube? And what do you say to convince them?
Brendan, you want to go at this first? I'll probably say a lot of the same things, but
Yeah, sure. I can take a pass at it. Well, I think, it's all about setting proper expectations at the start. I think the opportunity is apparent, but there's so many dimensions to be mindful of, and a lot of times what we're seeing is that performance benchmarks from comparative efforts, like in the sense of social, comparing Meta, TikTok benchmarks to what we can expect on YouTube isn't always the best way to start. So I think it's really about starting with proper expectations. I think, important to note that metrics like likes, comments, and shares are much more prevalent in some of the leading social platforms and beyond what we'll typically see in YouTube. So I think that's just one example of where we're often trying to work with clients on getting, being open to testing on YouTube. But I really think that's where we can't underestimate the story and the role of storytelling when it comes to the time that we're in and the opportunity that's in front of us. Sometimes critical to rally folks to take risks and venture into uncharted territories. And really just a great way to start is with a test, just to dip your toe.
Yeah, I would say all those same things. I think we always ask, what is it about YouTube that makes you feel like it's not valuable? And sometimes it's an old school person who's sort of like, well, YouTube content isn't premium. And so then you just can easily show them, well, you're advertising on Saturday Night Live. You don't want to advertise when people are watching Saturday Night Live on YouTube, and so it's things like that can usually convince people pretty quickly.
Great. Okay, so this question, if anyone wants to take this, brand safety, constantly a concern that brands have all over the place. We hear about that at Adweek all the time. So is that still a big concern on YouTube, or has that been addressed well enough?
Well, I can start, and Jess or Brendan, feel free to jump in. But I think Google has done a great job with brand safety in general. Where I think it's challenging is suitability, which is slightly different, right? I think they've done a really good job of getting rid of some of the most horrible content that came up in 2018-ish timeframe where people really freaked out. You're going to get almost none of that now with an ad on it. What is impossible for YouTube to do, it's not their fault, is to know this is what Tate's should have specifically. And that's why we talk about curation. And so I think YouTube is generally safe, but that doesn't mean you're going to be aligned and driving the best, match with your brand and the content. Jess, I don't know if you'd agree, but.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a gift. I don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about brand suitability on YouTube. But Matt is exactly right. It's more about effectiveness overall, right? So, brand suitability or safety is really about effectiveness. And so I think one of the reasons I've valued getting to work with Pixability is when you can see that you're more effective, by default, you're on more suitable channels. You're not having to deal with any brand safety issues.
All right, let's move on to another question. So what have you all seen as the best ways brands can work with agencies and tech partners to be successful on YouTube? Matt, do you want to start with that one?
Why don't we let Jess and Brendan answer this, since they would know. They would know better than I would, probably.
Yeah, I'll maybe start with something that came up earlier, which is ownership, right? And so from the brand side, when we have partners that can collaborate really well together, there's a multiplier effect. And I know it can be tricky with agencies and who owns what and scope, and that's a challenge. But, I have seen the most effective partnerships coming through collaboration. So that's been the biggest win. Having Pixability in the past as an underpinning across multiple agencies has been a huge help, because they're in some ways the sort of agnostic, non-political option, right? So I've leaned on them and Google a lot to say what's best for the business. And then there's always going to be room, you could see from that Venn diagram, for every agency to have a piece. So collaboration is really key. And then, candidly, having the right expertise in such a complex platform. So those are the two pieces, right? Is deep expertise and collaboration.
I'd build by just adding, I guess, a bit of an acknowledgement that we're currently navigating a really exciting, yet arguably the most complex era of advertising. We've got powerful new capabilities emerging almost daily, but the vast majority of the tech and the platforms that we're using lack interoperability or come with considerable complexity. That's a lot for a team to navigate. Data sets don't always mesh. Systems aren't compatible with one another. So I believe that the most valuable partners, the agencies and the partners that truly distance themselves from the pack, are the ones who can bridge those gaps, and connect the dots, and really engineer and amplify even better outcomes from the homogenous tools and platforms that every advertiser is using. And I can absolutely attest that our teams here at Dentsu view partners like Pixability as exactly that, a valuable partner that provides a truly strategic and differentiating layer on top of our YouTube activations. And not to mention just being a great all-around team to work with.
All
Thanks,
right. Do you have anything to add on top of that, Matt?
No, I think it really is figuring out for a brand the right combination of an agency and a partner that all works together. Like Jess said, it has to feel unified, again, because we don't want it to be layers of partners and agencies where you're starting to silo things. And I think that's where the three of us all agree, like, let's find ways for brand, agency, and tech partner to all unify things. So.
Great. Okay, here, question, can ads on YouTube run on any channel? Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one related to our safety and suitability discussion. So a few years back, maybe 4 years back, YouTube did something where they made it that the only channels that could receive ads were those of a certain size. And that immediately made it so that it was getting rid of the idea that a brand may run on a tiny little channel that just opened up yesterday and is going to post some crazy content and then go away. They've kind of taken down some of those barriers. I think there's good reasons why they've taken down those barriers. They want more creators to make money, and they don't want they find their creators very important, and I think they should. I think for an advertiser, though, there's a lot more long tail now. There's a lot more smaller channels that you're going to have an ad on. So the short answer is it can pretty much run on anything, minus, like I said, YouTube's doing a really great job of taking out the really bad stuff. If you've ever tested this with them, they're really good at taking stuff down pretty quickly. I know people still find examples of this, but it's so it will run on anything, size-wise, pretty much anything. It just usually won't run on an unsafe thing. So.
All right, great. This next question, going to kind of combine a couple that we see in here, but there's this question, what makes a creator very valuable? And then also some strategies to build audience that doesn't involve ad spend. So I know, Jess, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, these are, to me, super connected, right? So YouTube creators have often very highly engaged audiences, right? So these are people who might be putting out content every day. So when I look at a creator and am evaluating sort of value to a brand, for example, it starts with, do they have a highly engaged community that they've built, right? So that they will have sort of impact and influence over that community. The second piece is really about brand fit, but it's not always sort of the obvious, meaning, the obvious for Tate's might be somebody who does a cookie review series. Sure, that's going to be relevant. But often, if you think about yourself as a consumer, I might buy cookies, but I also have kids and I'm planning a vacation and am thinking about, so many other things. So if I can, as a brand, partner with a creator who is really engaged with my core consumer, regardless of if they are a cookie content expert or not, it's going to really resonate. And that's sort of the same way you build channel and audience, right? Without paid media, which is engage with your community, create content that is platform first, and really use the same playbook that YouTube creators use for your brand.
All right, great. I think we have time for one more question, but thank you to everyone who submitted. There's some really great stuff. All right, this last question. What type of behavioral audiences outside of YouTube native targeting do you find work best?
That's a really good question. As you all know, since YouTube is connected to Google, there's great behavioral targeting in YouTube where you can literally just say, I want to target this age group, this gender, et cetera. And and there's some really good stuff. On top of that, there's some great stuff within YouTube just in terms of retargeting options of people who, obviously come to your site or come to your channel. Targeting your CRM list is kind of a way of doing behavioral that works really, really well. The other thing that we're seeing work really well right now is we have an amazing partnership with Comscore, and we have audience data on channels where we can target them, these channels contextually, but know who the audiences are, what these channels over-index for in terms of audiences. So that, again, back to the Tate's example, we can give Tate's these channels all over-index for families that shop for snack foods and cookies, right? So that I think is another thing outside of the YouTube native targeting that works really well.
All right, that is all the time that we have for questions, but I would like to thank our speakers and our sponsor, Pixability. Just a couple final reminders to our audience. You can download the slides. The PDFs live below the video window. And then just be sure to check your email for a link to the on-demand recording a little bit later this afternoon. And if you enjoyed this webinar like I did, this was wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Be sure to check out the Adweek webinar calendar. You can find that. And you can see all of our upcoming webinars there. It's adweek.com/webinars. And then again, big thank you to Matt, Jess, Brendan. Thank you to our audience, all of you for joining us today. We appreciated you being here, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the next Adweek webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.